You're listening to the Just Japan podcast. Everything you want to know about Japan.
Well, hey there folks, and welcome to episode number 198 of the Just Japan podcast. Everything you want to know about Japan. I'm your host, I'm Kevin O'Shea, coming to you tonight from the streets of Beijing, China. It is a Wednesday night. It's after 10 o'clock. It's past my bedtime. But I realize, you know what? I don't have food for my kids' breakfast in the morning, so I better get to the store and buy some. And why am I up so late? Well, I just finished getting off of Skype, having a fantastic conversation with my longtime friend, very regular Just Japan podcast guest, Kansai PeeJay. That's right, PeeJay. He's been on talking about more topics than I can even get into. But one of those topics he talked to me about many years ago on the Just Japan podcast, actually specifically in episode number 27 back in August of 2014, was all about getting a job teaching at a university in Japan. So I decided to do a reboot of that episode because, you know what, I'm sure things have changed a lot in those 5 years. Not just PeeJay's perspectives, his ideas, his knowledge, his experiences, but also the kind of the beast of what is getting a job in Japan, and more specifically getting a job at a university in Japan. So I phoned up PeeJay, and he was more than happy to come on to the podcast and chat with me, and we had a great talk. And for those of you who may know or may not know, PeeJay and I are great friends, so we also, had to spend a bit of time pre-interview and post-interview just catching up. But I said, hey PeeJay, I gotta go, because I gotta go buy some food, because we need that for breakfast in the morning. So I'm coming to you on Wednesday, May 1st, 2019. Yesterday was the last day of the Heisei era in Japan, the last day of the former emperor, and today we have a new, I'm not Japanese, but the Japanese people have a brand new emperor, and it is the beginning of the Reiwa era. And it was also a special day because it is my daughter's 6th birthday. So Rena turned 6, so we had a special big party for her a few days ago, and then today we went to a very, very nice Japanese restaurant here in Beijing, just near our place. That's owned by a Japanese family. We had a fantastic lunch. It was really great way to ring in the Reiwa era with the new emperor, celebrate my daughter's birthday, and to bring to you a recording of episode number 198 of the Just Japan podcast. So guys, of course, I just want to let you know, I do have another podcast out there right now, the Making Better Teachers podcast, over at makingbetterteachers.com. So if you are an educator, you're a teacher, you're involved in the education world, you may be interested in that. And by the way, if you do hear sounds around me, it's because I'm out walking to a supermarket at 10:30 at night in Beijing, China. So go check that out. Check out my other podcast. That's doing well. Episode 19 of that will be dropping the same weekend as this episode drops. Of course I'm going to tell you, go check out all of the things I do. Check out my Twitter. I'm very active on Twitter at Mad4Maple. My old Twitter's gone. No more Jland Kev. The Twitter, they locked me out of that thing because I didn't update my phone number and stuff. But go check me out. Follow me at Mad4Maple. This podcast has a very vibrant, awesome Facebook page over at facebook.com/justjapanstuff, just like the podcast page, the landing page for the podcast. And if you go over to the Facebook page on Just Japan Stuff, there's like tons of Japan-related news links all the time. That's what that's all about. That's sharing information about Japan. For you, if you follow the Just Japan Stuff feed over on Facebook, you're always going to be connected to really great information about Japan. So go check that out, go follow. All right, now it's time for us to get into the interview portion of the Just Japan podcast. Oh, another thing I want to let you know is that coming up soon, guys, will be episode 200 of the podcast. That's going to be a party episode. That's going to be with a whole ton of former guests. I think I'm going to have some like games and things. It's just going to be pure awesomeness. So look forward to that. But now let's move on to the interview portion of the Just Japan podcast.
Please hang up and try again.
Hey folks, you know what? It's been too long. We're back with episode number 198 of the Just Japan podcast. Been too long since I had this guest on. You guys might know him as Kansai PeeJay. Kansai, welcome. Kansai PeeJay. PeeJay, welcome back.
It's been too long, sir. It's good to talk to you.
Yeah. So if you guys are regular listeners of the Just Japan podcast, you know who this man is. And we're here this week to kind of do a reboot of an episode that we did, believe it or not, all the way back in August of 2014. Oh my gosh.
5 years ago.
5 years ago. Yeah. I mean, now that's when we did an episode about university jobs in Japan. And to be honest, when I look back at the analytics, in the top 3 most popular shows of the podcast, that episode alone has had more than 10,000 downloads.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So a lot of great information was given out in that episode, and I know that I'm sure that things have changed since that point. I'm assuming, but we'll find out. And also it's a great chance to talk about a topic, especially for those of you who may be new to the podcast. I think many are, because we were on hiatus for basically 2 years. Yeah, but we're back. We're back and we're strong. And so PeeJay, again, like I said, I bet there's a ton of people out there listening who they know who you are. But for those out there who do not know, maybe they're new to the podcast, they're just joining us. Could you tell the listeners a little bit about yourself and what you do in Japan?
Okay. My name is PeeJay. I'm a long-term resident of Japan. I started out like a lot of people. Most people go one of 2 routes if they want to live here. They work in the eikaiwa industry, the private language schools, or they start out as an assistant language teacher in the public school system. And I did that. I came originally as a sister city teacher in Himeji back in the day. Then I moved on to the JET program. And then I went back to the States, and I'm from the U.S. A few years after that, I came back to Japan around 99. I started out going back to the ALT position. That didn't pan out after a couple of years. I was transferred to a private international high school, and started working there. And in my free time, I got my master's in TESOL, teaching English to speakers of other languages. After that, I started doing part-time university work. And I'm still a part-timer. I mean, it's a bit of a misnomer because that is my job. But in Japan, you're going to be either tenure track, or if you're an adjunct, you'll either be full-time on a contract of 3 to 5 years, or part-time, which are generally unlimited. There's been some issues with that because of labor changes, but basically, I work at 3 universities, and the newest one is only 2 years, but the others I've been working at for more than 7 or 8 years. So, and I've been doing university teaching for more than 10, 12 years.
That long, really? Wow. I guess so, huh? Yeah, I guess when we first met in 2008, right?
I think 7 or 8, wasn't it? Yeah.
2008. I came to Japan in 2008, and we met like right away because we'd been in contact before I came to Japan, because we through YouTube. Yeah. So okay. So I mean, that's kind of you got the nutshell there of kind of the where you started, where you are now. So I'm curious about the kind of trajectory. More like, you started off doing kind of ALT stuff, assistant language teaching. And my teaching story is all over the map until from where I started to now. I mean, I went to Korea back in 2002, like literally just because I'd never traveled before, and I'm like, I'm gonna travel for 1 year, and then I'm gonna come back to Canada and begin and continue like doing IT work, and here I am, um, here I am 17 years later, and I'm on my way down to Shenzhen, China to teach at like a flagship international school, doing really well for myself as a homeroom teacher. But I never, ever would have pictured myself where I am today back then. So when you first went to Japan, was teaching something you really wanted to do? Or was it?
God, no.
Okay.
Sorry, did I jump the gun on that one?
No. So I'm curious. I mean, like, so you went there doing the sister city thing. You were a jet. At what motivated you, for example, to decide that you wanted to get a master's degree?
Well, originally my undergraduate was in Japanese history, and I had only come here to beef up my academic resume to get into a better graduate school than I could otherwise.
Okay.
So I fell in love with Japan. Well, a love-hate relationship, but fell in love, and then also just fell in love with teaching. So that when I went back to the States a few years later, I did my TESOL certification and became a part-time substitute teacher. But that's not enough. And if you want to teach at the university level, you basically need a minimum of a master's degree.
Okay, so you got to a point where you're like, okay, I want to teach at a university.
Yeah.
So why did that pop up on the radar? Like, did you have like friends who worked at universities, people in your social circles? What kind of like what made you how did that get on your radar?
It was mostly just frankly economic. I had maxed out what I was likely going to make as a high school teacher.
Mm-hmm.
Without going into details, I was doing maybe 500,000 yen a month, a little bit more than that. But I wasn't gonna, unless you luck into those very rare jobs that you hear about, those golden jobs at any level.
Like the private internet or the private Japanese school jobs and stuff, that kind of thing, right?
But it was unlike my Japanese, though survival level is, I could speak, survival level Japanese. It wasn't fluent enough to get a job where that was a likelihood. So I just figured that realistically, that I was at a small private small private international high school that was increasingly getting smaller.
Okay,
and
yeah.
And I, by the end of it, by the 10 years there, I was in charge of the English program. And so I knew that I could see down the line, the school it closing or at least downsizing. Mm-hmm. And whether I would be there forever or not, my salary would never get any higher, not appreciably. So I just decided that it was time to go. A friend of mine was doing a master's program at Temple University, which is an American university, but they have campuses in Tokyo and Osaka.
Okay.
And so I was able to do that part-time. It took me about 4 years because it literally was part-time, just classes that I took at night on weekends. Mm-hmm. But once I got my master's in TESOL, then a lot of work opened up in the university. And, a lot of people go straight into full-time work, but I didn't want that because those are tended to be limited contracts of up to 3 and 5 years. So I basically wanted to stay as long as I wanted. So part-time was the way to go and a way to get my feet wet.
Okay, yeah.
And I've been it ever since. I know a lot of my friends have moved on to full-time work, and to be honest, it does occur to me that maybe I should do that. But right now, I'm at one of my 2 schools pays very, very, very well, mm-hmm. and it's hard to leave that.
Okay.
The others don't, and you got to balance that more and more jobs come open at lower and lower rates. Since the 10 years I've been doing university work, the salaries have gone down.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so that's an issue for anyone thinking about it.
Definitely something we're going to touch on. Now, I mean, I guess in a way, I found myself in a situation similar to yours, We had different kind of endings to it in a way, but like, I mean, you know me, PeeJay. You've known me for years, and I consider PeeJay one of one of my best friends in Japan.
Thank you.
Um, and I found myself in a position where I was working like almost working myself to death. I
Yeah,
mean,
you were.
I was working, 5 days a week full time, plus teaching on the weekends to earn extra money, and I was probably at the end of the day putting together probably around 400,000 a month, and with a family. Um,
That's impossible.
and I mean, but there are people who work, for a lot less, right? I mean,
Hmm.
people who are doing the same thing, but it's not the position I wanted to be in. I wanted more. So we, in the position we were in, we were kind of, trapped in a way. I mean, I would have loved to have stayed in Japan, but
Hmm.
I had to bite the bullet and take a big risk and, move on. And that was actually the best thing I could have done for my career. Looking in hindsight, it really gave me a professional boost and put me into kind of like a new category or zone. Um,
Hmm.
now, not I mean, to be honest, I would love to be back in Japan at some point, and that's something I'm planning on. But a few years down the road. Now, with regards to teaching in universities, we've already kind of touched on a few different things.
Hmm.
What does an average person? So obviously, there's a lot of people out there listening to this who are sitting back in America, Australia, New Zealand, the UK, wherever they may be, and they're like, I want to teach or I want to be in Japan. For a lot
Hmm.
of people, teaching is a means to an end. I want to be in Japan. I want to
Sure.
teach. What does an average person need to do to be qualified for a university job? I mean, just kind of the bare minimum.
Well, the bare minimum would be a master's degree.
Okay.
Not even necessarily in teaching or English, although increasingly that is what the better universities are asking for. But when I started, they just wanted a master's degree, and it could have been funeral sciences, it could have been engineering, but a master's degree and then some indication of interest or ability at English teaching, which was very flexibly defined.
Okay. Okay.
But
So,
that's bare minimum. And I would say to people abroad,
mhm.
don't even think about it.
Mm,
You're not going to get a good university unless you're famous and you're very well published in applied linguistics, or TESOL, or your field that might be, let's say, it could be medicine, where you teach English in the medical, field. Um, the reason is that universities won't hire abroad. There's too many foreigners here.
mm,
My advice is, if that's their goal, first of all, they should re-examine their goal, because I honestly believe that this is not a job to get started in anymore. It's not an industry where you can make a viable living, even at the university level, unless you're already here and ensconced.
okay.
I'm not saying don't do it, but think about it very seriously. Money cannot be the issue, and you have to have connection. So my advice would be, if they have a master's degree,
Hmm.
come over here as an ALT or an Eikaiwa teacher. Even still, because that 1 or 2 or 3 years they do that,
Hmm.
they would then use to find jobs locally. It's the connections. Every job that I've gotten at university is because I knew somebody who introduced me to the person who interviewed me. Yes.
I was going to say that's a very interesting thing. Now that I'm really immersed in the world of international education, I was in Japan for 10 years working at international school, but now that I'm
Hmm.
abroad, oh my God, the network that I've realized that is made with international educators. It's
Yeah.
insane. And you meet people at PD workshops. You travel to Thailand or you go to Shanghai, or you go to Japan
Hmm.
for a workshop and you meet people and you connect, you go for a drink or two. And the big thing in the international teaching world is Twitter. Twitter is huge, man. If you're not on Twitter as an international educator, you're lost. I mean, doing what I do. Like
Hmm.
that's how you make, like they call it, the PLN, the Professional Learning Network. Um, and people just like, if they like you, they take care of you and they help you. Um, but I mean, so definitely okay. So obviously you're talking about connections.
Yes.
So basically, unless you're someone like and from Twitter at my 2 yen, Brian Waters, been on the show a few
Hmm.
times, and he was on
Yeah.
early on in the day where I mean he teaches at a university in Kyushu and he teaches like forensic pathology. And
Yeah.
he worked for the LA County Coroner's Office, doing that kind of like, air quotes, real life CIS stuff, or CSI. And
But that's what I would call the professional. He was well known in his field. He worked at a top flight universities in his home
but
country.
he's also not in English. Like, he's not teaching English. He's
Yeah.
teaching science in English, right?
Yes.
So he's there. I mean, I've got a friend in Korea who's an economics professor, and he first worked as like the equivalent of an Eikaiwa teacher his first couple of years, but he happened to have a master's in economics, and he's an actual economist. So then he was actually able to get a job at a foreign language university teaching economics in English.
But again, that said, those jobs are very rare.
That's a different beat. Oh, is it? Or are they really? Okay.
Extremely rare, and they usually hire in-house, so that they'll find an English teacher who happens to have a degree. Like, my degree is in history. I've been offered to teach a history course at this university or that high school, and then you get into it that way. Again, Brian is well established, and that if you are well established, then getting a job from abroad coming here will work.
Okay.
But if you're in the field of English, which is not respected in Japan, I'm sorry, but it isn't, and you're not well published or well established, then they're not going to hire you. There's literally, if I throw a rock outside my window, I'm going to hit a university teacher in Osaka. We're thick as thieves. It's not a job that takes a lot. I would argue that as a teacher, as an educator, my real teaching was done when I was a high school teacher. What you do at university in terms of pedagogy is far less rigorous. I think there's a lot more work involved, but it's the administrative side of things, even at the part-time level.
Oh, really? Okay.
Dealing with administrations and every department and of every university is different, and you're really on your own. I bring my own computers, my own pens to classrooms, because universities don't supply English classrooms with decent equipment.
Oh, wow.
And the better the university, the worse the facilities are.
Okay.
They don't need to attract the big, they don't need, it's what used to be called pamphlet porn. And I worked in high schools. It was called a pamphlet porn back before the internet days. The idea is that your school needed to look good to bring people in. Well, if you're a national university, the worst universities I've ever worked for are national universities in terms of facility. And great, a great research university. I'm not knocking the level of research they do, but when you're going to teach English there, you're walking into a room with a chalkboard and nothing else. There may be no, they may have a cassette tape player, and that's it. And you may or may not have Blu-ray or DVD or projectors, but all of that is kind of luck of the draw. And the better the university, the less consistent that draw would be.
So you almost have to like show up with like you've got your backpack, and inside there you're gonna have your laptop. You're gonna have a small mini projector. You're gonna have your.
I know I don't have my own mini projector, but I know a lot of my friends that do. And I have every dongle in the world that'll connect to everything in the world. And I've been at my universities now. I mean, the longest university I'm at right now is, 7 years? I don't know. And I'm well connected, so I get the rooms that I want, and I have to fight for that.
Okay.
Otherwise, you're going back to the 1950s. Imagine if you're working for the Peace Corps. That kind of English teaching. That's what universities is like.
Wow.
Because consistently you can't presume. I don't want to throw all universities. I've worked at some very advanced programs that are quite rigorous and both technically and pedagogically advanced and demanding, but they're rare. Basically, Japanese students study English to get into university, so they only require English to justify it being on the entrance test to begin with. So both the ability of your students and the interest in most departments rapidly declines. So I teach engineering students, architecture students, chemistry, biology. I do a lot of the sciences. I've done architecture students before. I have done a few international studies and business students, but by and large, most departments don't value English. They just have to have it.
Oh wow,
So
okay.
you're going to get the worst classrooms, and you're going to get the worst support. Depending on the university, again, it varies quite considerably.
Mm-hmm.
But I think most people would be shocked if they went into, as someone who taught in Japan, most of my adult life, the amount of facilities, equipment, support that I got at the junior high school, senior high school, private and public level is 20 times higher than what I get at most universities.
Wow. Okay. Holy cow. So I mean, I'm someone who's used to having a smart board in every classroom.
Yeah, that's.
One to
Oh,
one.
I have one where I've got it's a 200-inch TV that functions as a smart board.
Okay.
They bought it. It's wireless. It connected all these things that you can do. They put it into buildings that don't have Wi-Fi or Bluetooth.
Ah, nice. That's good.
So basically, it's a very small projector.
Nice. That's awesome.
But again, that's the thinking. And I mean, I'm lucky right now. I would say that the universities I work at now are pretty good, but it's taken me 10 years to find where I want to be.
Okay, yeah. It almost kind of reminds me of in my 10 years in Japan, there was like that period of I spent 7 months as a CNET teaching in Osaka, like in public schools. And I remember like the junior high school I taught at in next to Juso, Shinkatano. And I remember like going there and it was like is there anything I can do to show a video or anything? And they're like, we have this like big TV kind of cart thing, and it was actually a pretty good setup. It was a giant TV in a cart with a laptop, and I could you could run all this stuff. No one had used it. It was in a storage room, caked in dust. And I remember asking like the teachers at the school, like, how do I use this? And no one could answer. They're like, we don't know because we've never seen anyone use it before. So I became the guy who learned how to use it and would cart this big giant TV around. All right.
It's very similar to that. You've got, I mean, like that school with the 200-inch screen TV that acts as a smart whiteboard. It was amazing what it could do, and they ordered one for every single classroom because someone's getting a kickback, I'm sure. But again, no Wi-Fi, so there's no connectivity. So you couldn't do you were using it for a tenth of what it was capable of.
Yeah.
And that's very typical. The universities in Japan tend to have a lot of money, but they don't necessarily. There's no teacher advising the tech departments if there is a department. I work at one university that doesn't have a tech department. It's every gakubu, the history department, the literature department. They all take care of their own rooms, and they don't have anyone that knows. I once had a system where the projector was run on Unix, and the school had no one in the school that could fix it.
Wow.
And the contractor that had sold it to them went out of business several years previously. So it took us 8 months to get a new projector in the room.
Wow.
For a class that was it was a presentation class. I was teaching them how to do professional academic presentations with slides, how to interact with the slides and the audience. So it was mandatory for the curriculum, but we didn't have a projector for the whole semester.
That's insane.
I love that school, but that's not uncommon.
That's insane. Okay, so I want to connect a couple of things here. When I'm thinking about our episode that we recorded 5 years ago, one thing you did talk about was that could be advantageous to someone hoping to get into the world of teaching and universities is joining professional organizations. So yes. I'm wondering if I'm I'm Joe Blow on the ground in Japan. I've been teaching for a few years. I've decided I want to move into the university world. I've got a master's in blah, 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 something, but I got a master's. I got that. So I've got the minimum. I'm in Japan. I've been there for a few years. Maybe I know a little bit of Japanese. I've got an apartment. I'm not a mouth breather.
Sure.
So what are some things I can do that would make me, make a move towards university jobs a bit easier? Again, I remember you talking about the professional organizations. Is that still a thing? Do you still believe in that?
So.
Okay.
They look on the CV, which is the academic resume, right? The curriculum vitae. You need to first of all join JOLT, which is the Japan Association of Language Teachers. I don't know what the current fees are. I mean, I'm a member, but I don't know. That is the organization in Japan. So you join JOLT, and they have a website. You just type in JALT or the Japan Association of Language Teachers. I'll give you these links later, Kev.
Mm-hmm. Thank you.
That would be one, and that's important. Sometimes I argue about the true professional pedagogical usefulness of JOLT, but in terms of sheer practicality,
And I know JOLT does have there's a lot of regional branches, right? So I know there's like a Osaka branch. There's a possibly, maybe, I don't know if a Kobe branch or a Kansai branch.
Yes, there's a Kobe branch.
There's a Kobe branch, Osaka branch. I'm assuming definitely probably a big Tokyo branch, and so throughout
multiple Tokyo branches. Yeah.
So throughout Japan, there's very like regional branches, city.
And you don't even have to worry about that. Just join the national organization, and they'll put you in the local. They have two publications, which is the JOLT Journal and the Language Journal. The Language Journal called the Language Teacher. I don't know if they still have, but they used to have a job. What do you call it? A job page where universities would advertise.
Okay.
And that's a useful site as well as just because the language teacher does a lot of practical kind of, action research and basic pedagogical advice, whereas the JOLT Journal itself is more academic in nature.
Okay.
But both of them would be useful to anyone that's even thinking about university work. Mm-hmm. Besides that, there is the JASIT. If they speak any Japanese, even a little, JASIT, which is the Japan Association of College English Teachers, JACET. They have a website. It's mostly in Japanese, but they do have English pages where universities and high schools will advertise teaching work.
I remember years ago you sent that to me.
Yeah.
And I remember that. It was when I was looking around. Unfortunately, I don't really meet the.
I'll send you the links. Yeah,
no. But I was just thinking, I personally don't meet the minimum requirements for most jobs because I do not have a master's. I've got 2 bachelors. But
even here, there are there's high school work as well. It isn't.
But I was just thinking. I remember those. I remember the page itself had English on it, but when you would click on a lot of those job ads, they would be often 100% in Japanese.
Yes.
So then I'd have to have my.
You need to either have I can't read it. You need to have a Japanese wife or husband, or a good friend that can.
Yeah.
Even they have to be fluent in both languages, so they can go skip this one, not worth translating, skip it. This is good. Okay. Because a lot of the stuff is in Japanese. Yeah. And then there's one more site I should mention, JREC, which is the Japan I don't know, but it's JREC-IN.
Okay.
Now they're not English; they are research-oriented Japanese and English-speaking jobs. Like Brian's job have been advertised here.
Okay.
So there's a lot of stuff that wouldn't apply to English teachers, like an engineer or a computer scientist, but they do as English as well, and I'll send you the links for them. But again, even though the page is in English, I'd say 75% of the ads are in Japanese. And the reason is universities English is not, you're not going to be, there are very few universities where you'll be able to communicate with staff and support personnel, HR departments, and so on in English. I've worked at a couple that did, but by and large, you've got to be able to speak some level of functional Japanese. And you know me, my Japanese is not great, but it's enough that I can go in and say, hey, this projector's not working, I need a new one. Yeah. Or I'm in HR, you're taxing me at a different rate than you should be, things like that. So if someone who is, my advice is someone who's here and currently doing either Kaiwa work or high school work is to start with those 3 or 4 sites, JREC, JASIT, and JOLT.
Yeah.
And then drinking, a favorite hobby of you and I, but drink selectively. Meet people, talk, networking is everything. Every job I've ever had at the senior high school level or university has been introduced to me by somebody. Because all these universities will advertise on these sites, But usually they're doing that as a pro forma behavior. They usually have someone in mind already, or they have a short list for interviews.
Okay.
And that comes from personal, right? People know you, and that means something, that they can vouch for you. So, the current 3 universities I'm at, all 3, 2 out of the 3 were recommended to me, not only to apply to it, but they then put in they contacted the application committee and made sure that my name was moved to the top. And that helps because, English teachers are an interesting bunch. We have a lot of eccentrics, and universities, just like any other English teaching institution, would want to screen out people. And word of mouth and a personal recommendation always go a very, very, very long way.
Absolutely. I mean, I think of my current context. Like I'm moving from my job in Beijing to a new one in Shenzhen, China, and actually how this one happened. It was I'd been going through the job hunting process from October. I started in October of 2000. So like the international teaching year begins in August. So so August 2019 coming up, new year. The job hunting season begins actually, things I learned, September of like 2018, looking for those new jobs. And I started in October, and I was a bit cocky walking into it, thinking, hey, I've got 12 years as a homeroom teacher or so, and I've got tons of experience and lots of PD, and my resume is fantastic. But it was an absolute struggle, and things that helped me with this one is actually in October of last year. Actually, if I go back even further, we go back to the last academic year, so like maybe April of 2018. Myself and some other people wrote a proposal to do a presentation at a conference. Yeah, we wrote a proposal to do a presentation at a conference at this international school in Shenzhen. And we wrote the proposal, and we had to practice stuff and this and that. We sent the proposal off, and the proposal it was to a large governing body called ACAMIS, which is all like international schools in China and Mongolia. That got approved at the end of June. So then we found out that we would, in October, be going down to Shenzhen to do this presentation. So I go down to Shenzhen in October with a team from my school, several of us doing a few different presentations. And I meet the principal of that school. I meet the early years principal. I meet vice principals. I wasn't just attending the conference. I was presenting. And I'm very heavy on Twitter. So they were asking people, if you're heavy on Twitter, please promote our conference using these different hashtags. So of course, me, I'm all over Twitter, and I'm a fiend. I'm just like tweeting. I'm presenting. I'm spending time talking to the principal, meeting them in person, these folks. So then, this winter, when it came time for me to, find a job, I remember that I talked to this principal several times, had some conversations, some really nice conversations. I'd presented at a conference, a very large conference at their school, and people from their admin team had seen my presentation. And I'm like, hey, guys, I reached out to them. I'm like, I would like to work at your school. And that didn't get me the job, but what that did do is get me an interview.
Yeah.
But it took but at the end of the day, I had a few interviews, and then I was hired. But I mean, talk about networking digitally through Twitter, but also I'd met the person in person. I'd met the administrators in person. And I'd gone to this conference, again, a very professional conference where I'd presented at, and it took all of these different pieces for me to get the great job that I have now.
But I think what you're honing in on, it's these kind of rarefied worlds, and international education is very similar to the university academic world. It's a very small, inbred world. And yeah, I don't mean to diminish love.
Oh, we're having some connectivity issues here.
Where did I drop off?
Okay, you just said I don't mean to diminish, and then it cut off. So can you go back to that?
I don't mean to diminish professional development or enthusiasm for teaching, because I love teaching, and I know you do, and that's one of the things we have in common. But these rarefied worlds of international education or university work, they're inbred, and they're very much filled with so much diversity of character that people they can't look at for example, you had a CV that said that you've been a homeroom teacher for 10 plus years, but they don't know those schools. They don't trust what they see on the paper, and even if they go out of their effort to contact your workplaces, which they rarely do, even when they do, they can't trust it. So that's why I think, as much as professional development is important, that networking is equally important. You had been down there, people knew you, people could say, well, yeah, I met him, he's reliable, or I've seen him teach, he's good, or he's not a flake, or he's not a kook, he's responsible, he cares. That matters. And the jobs, all 3 jobs I got, 2 of the 3, I walked into the interview and I was, in a suit and they said, Lena, don't worry, mate, you got this.
Okay.
What do you mean? Oh, because you've already been spoken for 3 of our best teachers. We want to know, are you going to show up? Are you going to treat the students well? And are you going to turn everything in when it needs to be in? And they said, this is just a format. What a format? This is just a
formality.
Thank you. My English is lost.
A formality. Yes.
Formality. And it went well. And the other job, the third of my 3 jobs, I didn't know anyone there, but they looked at my CV and they said, well, you've worked at 4 different previous schools where we know people.
Okay.
Can we contact them? I mean, not your official recs, but can we contact teachers there who might know you? And I said, yeah, it's an open book. I don't care. And they did, it's important to build that kind of professional network so people can say, I vouch for this person.
Yeah.
And because especially in Asia, or I think when you ever work abroad in anywhere, it could be in Eastern Europe, foreigners who come there, like us, come there for a variety of reasons, and some of them good, some of them not. But because of that colorful kind of motivator that brought us here, they're not sure whether we're real teachers or not. And I don't even necessarily think you have to be a real teacher, but you have to be
professional.
Exactly.
I think that's the term. I mean, that's from my years in Japan. And I mean, yeah, I'm the hardcore educational professional kind of guy now. But I mean, like when I moved to Korea, say let's go back to like 2002 again. I did not have a teaching degree. I had no formal or informal training in teaching. I worked at a friggin' game company doing like 3D Studio Max, like modeling, and I was a junior artist. So it was like I made park benches and trees for video games, and then I went to teaching kindergarten with literally 0 training.
Talk about throwing you into the deep end.
Oh boy, and it was rough, and it was simply because I spoke English, but at the same time, like I think of like fast forward like even just 2 years later, 3 years later, where I'd made the decision that I wanted to become a professional teacher, although I had a Bachelor of Arts and nothing else. Oh well, a diploma in electronic game design. That didn't help me with kindergarten though. But I mean, like I showed up to work on time.
Yeah.
I didn't fall asleep on the floor of my classroom.
Sad that that's the point, but it is. It really is the point.
I didn't come to class to teach children drunk. And the children weren't drunk, but teachers drunk. I never did those things. But I mean, I worked with people who did stuff like that.
And I see that at every level in Japan as well. I think, again, teaching abroad and engenders this very broad motivation for a lot of people to come here. And some of them, like you said, I don't care. I've only been in a hiring position a few times in my life, but I cared less about their degrees and more about the sense of professional decorum. Will they show up every day? Are they dressed suitably for whatever the job requires? Do they have a certain amount of conscientiousness for the students and their coworkers? And I see that all the way from university back to when I was a ALT or even a private lessons teacher. Some people don't have that, and it doesn't matter what it says on paper. You can kind of sense that in an interview, but sometimes I feel bad for those committees. They might interview 50 people for 3 jobs, and they can't see, and they need to rely on that professional network. They need to rely on a friend that may just be a drinking buddy, but they've been drinking buddies for 5 years at different universities or different high schools, and they know that guy has to hire and fire people every day and work with people. So he says X is a good teacher or X is responsible. We go, okay, that's what I want now. The rest I'll work with.
I suppose too, like on the opposite end too. Like I've met people in my time in Japan who I worked with one fella for years who just completely pulled the wool over the administration's eyes. Like he just said all the right things to them. He put on all the right shows at the right times, and they thought he was just like the cat's meow, man. They thought he was the most fantastic teacher in the world. But I saw this dude day to day, what he did in his classroom, and what he did was like sub-mediocre teaching day to day. And he did not care about the well-being of his students, where they went, he only cared about himself and how he looked. So like when I would kind of peer into his room from time to time, it was like, man, he was doing anything but teaching. But when he knew that admin were coming, or he would do some kind of presentation for admin, he would it was really impressive and frustrating, because you're like, wow, he's a great showman, and if only they knew. But I mean, but I mean, so you meet those kind of people too, right?
The balance of that, right? I mean, ultimately, I know people like that as well, who, and honestly, at the university level, less so, I think, where in your field, but in my field, that would be fine. Because universities, honestly, a lot of them don't care what I do. They want to know that I took attendance so that they can credit people for being there.
Okay.
I had at once a special needs student with MS, just a couple years ago, and they didn't tell me. He just walked in a wheelchair. I didn't know what could he do. What could he do? Did
you just say he walked in a wheelchair?
Okay, you're right. He reeled in a wheelchair, and his English was very good, but I didn't know, so I communicated to the office. They didn't give me any advance notice.
Okay.
And I said, I want to know he's speaking on a whisper. So can he communicate? Can he do pair work? I do a lot of different group activities where I move around the students. I want them moving all the time. Every 5-10 minutes, they're in a different group doing something, building upon something we just did.
Yeah.
He can't do that. What can he do? So can you find out for me? And they came back in both languages, English and Japanese. Don't mark him late because there's no elevator for that building, so he has to be carried up.
Wow. Okay.
And I'm going, that's fantastic. I was never thinking about marking him late. I want to know what can he do and can't he do, so I can, create. So I got to assess this guy. I got to be able to say he's doing this work or not. For example, they wanted him to do extensive reading, which is a big thing it was a big thing at that university. And I said, he can't seem to read. Not because he can't read, but because he can't prop his neck up long enough to read a book. Is his mother or someone else reading to him? I need to know what he can do, and I'll work around it. I'll do anything. I don't care. But you got to tell me what he is willing and able to do in and out of the classroom. And they never got back to me. I waited till the end of the class. 14 weeks later, the end of the semester, they got him a special desk. And they just moved it in there and said, see, now we've done everything. And I said, well, first of all, there's only one more week. Second of all, you've still never told me what you can or can't do. Fortunately, he was very good at English, although, again, he spoke at a whisper. So he would write things. And he would tell me, I can do this. And I asked him, because after 3 or 4 weeks, I didn't know what else to do. I said, I'm terrified to put you in pair activities because you speak so quietly. What can you do? He said, I can speak, but it takes energy. So sometimes I want to participate, sometimes I don't. I said, okay, you give me a signal, and then otherwise he would pair off with me.
Okay, yeah. Wow. So, yeah. Jeez. I mean, I suppose that's also the kind of concept of like the fact that Japan, when you talk about, there's kind of an anachronistic thing there when you talk about, like, say, those classrooms that you have to deal with, like with blackboards and no technology. It's also quite anachronistic when it comes to dealing with special needs like that, right? It's just kind
They
of
all, I mean, I know it's a stereotype, and I don't think it's always true, but I've heard when I first came here, Japan is North America about 30 years ago in terms of treatment of women or LGBTQ or special needs or technology.
mm-hmm.
And that's not always true. But it is. I think that's a good attitude going in, to think of yourself as, well, ultimately, I'm going in and I'm going to teach English, and I want to do this or that. This is my goal. And the university can help or not help, but I'm going to get it done as much as I can.
Mm.
And you really got to let go of the kind of, and that's why I warn people against university work. Come here, get a job, get to know people in the Eikaiwa ALT industries, what have you, and then maybe get your foot wet. Maybe talk to university teachers, get known, and then certain universities. I worked at this one university. They're so fantastic. I only quit them because they were so far away, and they didn't pay very well. But I was teaching real university level English. And I don't mean just English. We were teaching them functional skills like how to do APA research, APA research reports, presentation. Those kids, they did more work in a week than most of my universities do in a year. And it was, but the payoff was the school, you needed anything, you got it. You needed this, you needed that piece of technology, you needed whatever, they were there for you, and they were there for you. Most people didn't speak English in the administrative staff, but they were so willing to work with you because they felt what you were doing was intrinsically valued to their program.
Wow.
That's very rare in Japan, beyond the actually very rare period. And and my feeling was that was so wonderful. It was worth. I worked there for almost 9 years.
Oh, wow.
Even though it was way out in the mountains, it wasn't worth anything in terms of salary. But I just loved doing what I did. In the end, I couldn't afford it anymore. But now I work at much better paying jobs, although the level of English has lowered. But the fortunate thing about being here again since 1999 is I won't work at a bad university because I don't have to. I'm well connected enough in the community that people say, "Hey, PeeJay, we're looking for someone on Tuesday. We're looking for someone on Friday. Here's a full-time job. Here's a part-time job. Will you apply?" You can kind of not say pick because it's still a bit of a crapshoot for, I don't care how long you're being here. It's a bit of a crapshoot about what jobs you get and what salaries you're at and what have you. But I'm in a much better position than if I were in California coming over here for university work. My advice would be to those people, don't. Not say, if you really love Japan, come here as an ALT or an Eikaiwa teacher. Even if you've got your master's degree, come that way and, make a plan, a 2-year or 3-year plan to learn about the university system, to learn about the ins and the outs. One of the things we were dealing with, I think, in the last time that we had this 5 years ago, was that there was a new labor law that was going into effect, and that it really scared university teachers because traditionally, for example, part-time work, I could teach forever. They would give me 1-year contracts in perpetuity. The issue now is you can't work at any place for more than 5 years without being the workplace. It doesn't have to be university, has to consider you for full-time work. Now, not full-time, but a non-contracted, a full-time, part-time job. If that makes, it won't make sense to anyone who's not been here. But the reality is, instead of being on limited term contracts, after a period of time, they need to open you up to regular employment.
Okay, yeah, gotcha.
Now, for a while, a lot of universities were freaked out by that, and they were canning people after 5 years because they didn't want to meet this requirement. But it's begun to settle out now, and most of the good universities now have recognized this is actually a benefit, not a hindrance. And it's great. In one of my universities, I'm no longer on. I don't sign a contract every year
Okay.
because I've been there 7 years, and they know I'm a reliable employee. So they offered, "Do you want the permanent part-time status?"
Okay.
And I applied for it. I got it, and it's done. And I'm ostensibly no different than a Japanese teacher in terms of contract and hiring. I mean, there are other differences, but so my advice would be, it's such a minefield to navigate. What people need to do is, again, get local.
Boots on the ground, right? Get there and learn.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Wow. Wow, that's a lot of wonderful stuff to unpack for you guys out there listening. This is why I wanted to do a reboot of this topic, because it is so fascinating and very alien to me. I mean, it's the whole.
It is and it isn't. It's very similar to the world you describe. It's just with a different cast of characters.
I suppose so, right? I suppose so. Like you said, it's I was kind of walking into my most recent job hunt, foolishly thinking I've got a fantastic resume, everyone will want me. But like you said, it's a resume, it's a piece of paper, or it's something on a screen. Having those connections is often so much more valuable. Now, I'm curious. I don't want to keep you too much longer. You're an hour ahead of me. It's only a little bit.
It's okay.
It's okay. You're on holiday, right? Yeah.
Yeah, I've got the full 10 days off.
Nice. Today was
a lot of my friends don't have off because universities tend to work through Golden Week.
Oh wow, okay. Today's a holiday for me because it's May Day, and if you live in a good communist country, you're going to have May Day off.
How are the people?
Yeah, it's my daughter Rena's birthday too, so it works perfectly.
Happy birthday, Rena!
But I'm back teaching grade 1 in the morning, so yeah, and I do have to actually run out to the supermarket and buy some bread before I go to bed tonight, because we need that for the kids' breakfast. Obviously, guys, I'm not making my living as a podcaster here. We got to teach in the morning and buy bread at night. So, I mean, it sounds like you got yourself in a pretty good situation here. Do you think?
Economically, I would say no.
Okay, I'm just wondering. Is you've been in Japan for quite some time. Do you find yourself? Do you think you're going to be retiring as a professor in Japan? No.
I'll tell you why. Here's the thing. I'm a gay male. That's not a particular secret. It might be a shock to some of your listeners, but it's not to most people who know me.
I don't think so. Yeah. I think many probably know that, but nonetheless, yeah.
In any case, the reason why I bring that up is this is not a culture you want to be single in your 40s and 50s. What I pay for in healthcare and pension is so high it would be shocking.
Okay, yeah, true.
I make a decent salary. I don't want to get into specifics, but it's over 8 million yen a year, and I'm barely making ends meet because I have no deductions. I have no children. I have no wife. I'm not saying that those things don't come with their own costs.
Yeah.
But I'm in a system where Japan has basically, as you know, is starving for people. They're not making enough for tax and pension. There's too many old people, not enough young people.
Yeah.
So everything in the tax, pension, healthcare system is based on having children.
Yeah.
And if you're not, it's a problem. And I find the more money I make, the more I'm taxed.
Well, yeah, that's the whole system. It's all about that, right? It's all about even like your the city tax. It's all about how much money do you make? How much money do you earn? So, I mean, one of the things that kind of honestly detracts from me, and we were speaking pre-interview, for me, I mean, I want to live in Japan. I love Japan. I miss Japan terribly. I mean, I really do love living there. But in my situation now, where I work and where I do work, where international teachers can often work, we live under a tax-free umbrella. And so basically what we make is what we make, and it's wonderful. And I've been living abroad for so long that I've been a non-resident of Canada for more than a decade. I don't pay taxes in Canada because I don't receive any of the benefits that taxpayers in Canada receive. And that's a very normal legal thing.
Yeah.
But if I were to move to Japan, um, like I explained to you, I would be what they call a local hire because my
Mhm.
wife is Japanese. So I'm going to make a better salary than I used to make when I lived there. But then because I have that better salary, I'm going to be taxed more. My city
Yeah.
tax,
Mhm.
my shakai hoken, everything's going to be much higher. So
Yes.
at the end of the day, no, I have kids and a wife and stuff, so it would be different in that respect. But there's nothing comparable to what I'm making now.
Yeah. Well, that's the thing. A friend of mine teaches in Hong Kong at university, and he makes twice my salary.
Mm.
And the university pays him taxes in an envelope. And that's how they work it. Well, I probably shouldn't say that, but they do. And in many ways, Japan is not that way. Japan has an ambivalent relationship with English in general,
Yeah.
and the privileges are less. Like you, I love this country. I have friends here. I've been here. I'm a long-term resident. I'm not a citizen, nor do I expect to be, but I love this country and I don't want to leave it. But I have to look at friends that have moved to Asia and in the Middle East, and they're making 2 or 3 times what I'm making. And,
Mm.
and part of me thinks I've got debts which aren't related. I mean, I have a spending problem. And part of me thinks if I left Japan, I could double or triple my salary and cut my costs in half.
Yeah.
And but the thing is, I just love living in Japan. I have so many friends here. I'm not fluent, but I speak enough that this is home and I'm comfortable. As an adult, I've spent more time in Osaka than I've spent anywhere ever in the United States.
Yeah.
This is my home, and it's hard to leave it. But
Yeah.
one thing I would advise anyone who's thinking about coming here or living abroad anywhere, China, pick a country,
Yeah.
doesn't
Yeah.
matter. It changes you, and it's hard to go back.
Mm.
And not to say that people shouldn't take the leap, but they should take it very considerably, very seriously, because I don't know anyone who has trouble with culture shock. I know 1,000 people who have trouble with reverse culture shock.
Mm.
And I know a lot of people who could never, ever really go home again.
Yeah. I'm one of those people.
And negatively, you have a wonderful family.
Yeah.
You have a very rich life. I'm not.
Yeah, but I don't think I could ever. I don't think I can't picture myself. Yeah, being. I mean, I will always, of course, be Canadian, and I love Canada. But
Oh, and you're very Canadian.
hey, what's this? What's this all about, eh? But I can't envision myself when I do visit leading that kind of lifestyle. Yeah.
You open the world, you open your eyes, and it's a wonderful thing because you really do broaden your horizons. I know that's a cliche, but it's very true.
Yeah.
But it comes at a cost, both economic and emotional. And I wouldn't say. I mean, recently I was talking to a cousin that lives in the States, and he wants to be an English teacher in Japan. And I said, the salaries keep going down, and the benefits go down, and the emotional costs go up. I'm not saying don't do it, but think about it very seriously. Number one, do a lot of research, like listening to your podcast is one thing.
Yeah.
But do a lot. Be very active, and then try to find a job that you can do easily for 1, 2, or 3 years.
Yeah.
Like Kaiwa or ALT. Do something that you can go there on a lark, and then decide, is it worth making that transition to? Because you work at the international scene. The international education scene is not easy to get into.
No. And that was a battle. It took me years to get into it, right?
But it's probably even harder than the university scene in that respect. But they have that in common. There are so many requirements, both technical and professional, that you need to get through. That my advice to people is go, first of all, find an easy job. Work it, whatever you can for a year. If you want to go to China, find a stupid Eikaiwa type job.
Yeah.
and then decide, if I really want to make this city my home, or this country my home, then what professional requirements do I need to get to continue?
Yeah.
I think a lot of people do it in the reverse. They want to get all the requirements. I met a guy very recently who has a PhD in engineering and a master's in English teaching, and he's working in Kyoto, and he hates it because he got all the technical degrees, and he was published enough that he actually could get a job from, he was in, I don't know, some podunk state in the middle of America, I don't know. It wasn't a big one, but he was well published and he knew his field, so he got a job, which is rare, direct hire, and he came in, and then he found he didn't really like Japan. It wasn't the country that he learned from anime and his love of Japanese food. And I'm not knocking those hobbies. We all have our interests. But that's like saying, I want to go to America because I like hot dogs. Well, that's naive. You could come to Japan if you like martial arts.
Yeah. Oh, we're walking up. We're freezing up again. You hear me?
I can hear you, but there's a lot of static.
Oh, we're back. We kind of seem to be back again. Gunham, are you? Can you hear me?
Oh, it's very static.
Very staticky. Okay. Well, can you hear me now? Can you hear me now?
Now it's cleared up right now.
All right. You know what? Hey, PeeJay, it's pretty late. This is awesome. This is like a great conversation.
It is, but I don't know if there's enough here for a show.
I don't want to keep you too much longer, sir. And I also,
you got to work tomorrow.
I gotta work tomorrow. I gotta get going. So I mean, and you've given a lot of great information here. How if people want to find you online? How can they find you? Reach out to you? Are you active online anymore? I don't know.
Yes, I am. Instagram is everything. Facebook is for dinosaurs, and Twitter, outside of professional development, is dead.
Okay.
I'm just on Instagram, and I will give, it's Kansai PeeJay.
Okay.
And I will give you the link to give to people, because right now I have about 750 followers. It goes up and down by 100 every month, and it drives me insane. I want 1,000.
Okay,
so I want your people to follow me.
So, folks, we're gonna show notes at justjapanstuff.com for episode 198. There will be a link to PeeJay's Instagram.
Yay!
And that only, because that's all that counts.
But I'll also give you the JREC and the JOLT.
Oh yeah, all those important.
I'll email that to you tomorrow.
Yeah, those links. Don't worry, this episode will not go up tomorrow because I'll be sleeping shortly
and then working
with very small children who are.
By the way, tell your children I have presents for both of them for several birthdays and Christmases.
Nice. They will be very excited to hear that. I will go and wake them up right now.
No, actually don't.
No, I won't. That would be bad parenting. So I'll tell them tomorrow morning over breakfast. Well, PeeJay, thank you for joining us again. Hey, man, we're 2 episodes away from 200. Oh my goodness. I want you involved in that one. That's going to be a party one, I think.
I want in on that.
I think we're going to get a whole bunch of silly heads that from Just Japan podcast past.
The regulars?
I think so. I think that's the only way to do it. You Higgins, Mully, gets maybe Scott in there, you know? Yeah.
I'd like that.
All right, cool, man. Well, thank you so much.
It was good to talk, and I'm looking forward to your return visit for the summer.
Nice. All right, folks, that does it for another episode of the Just Japan podcast. Everything you want to know about Japan. That was episode 198, and I want to take a moment to just thank Kansai PeeJay for stopping by the podcast again, sharing his awesomeness, his great experience, his funny personality, his knowledgeable personality, and all of that jazz with us. Again, go over, check out his Instagram page. Very important for him. Check out all the links that he shared with us. And that's it for this week's edition of the Just Japan podcast. We're back. We're full on. We're back each and every week. Thank you so much for all of you guys sticking with me, for coming back and listening. What can I say? Follow me on all the other social media places for lots of cool information about Japan and just all the other things that I'm doing. Check out my YouTube channel, youtube.com, Busan Kevin. I'm doing a lot of stuff there again. Well, not a lot of stuff, but I'm doing some more stuff. I'm getting more active. follow me on Twitter, follow the Facebook page, all that stuff. That's a great way to always connect. And of course, you can always email me at justjapanpodcast@gmail.com. All right, guys, that's it for another week of the Just Japan Podcast. So wherever you are in the world, I hope you're happy, hope you're healthy, and I'll be talking to you guys real soon.